The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
This episode and every episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast was brought to you by the generous and awesome support of listeners like you. Do your part and go to mattalkonline.com/join the team and make your monthly pledge. You'll get some cool rewards and perks like access to my Mat Talk Online statistical almanac, digital preview guides, and even some cool swag like shirts, hats, and pint glasses. mattalkonline.com/join the team. And welcome one and all, mainly just you actually, to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jason Bryant. This show, news, reviews, previews, and interviews for the most notable names and topics in the sport of wrestling. And I mean the Olympic, college, high school, international style of wrestling, although there are instances where this show and shows on this network at mattalkonline.com will cross over into the world of sports entertainment with guests that have the wrestling backgrounds into what many had termed pro wrestling. Now we call it sports entertainment, as we know our Olympians and our international senior level athletes are actual professionals. They are professional wrestlers. However, as we separate the two terms, yes, there are shows coming that will actually explore the amateur, if you will. I don't like using that terminology very much, but using the amateur wrestling backgrounds of those in professional wrestling, that is something I've been trying to get working on for a number of years at this point. But I know Jerry Briscoe, good friend of the program, good friend of the network, good friend of mine and yours, good friend of wrestling. He's on board with helping me produce, well, not produce, but line up some guests for that. Not quite doing the pro wrestling podcast circuit by any means, but there's a couple things here that don't get answered on some of those other shows that you hear, you know, guys like Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, hosted by Conrad Thompson. These are shows that I'm getting off on a little pro wrestling tangent here for a moment. I grew up watching this stuff, and those shows are kind of like in my wheelhouse of what I remember. But I'm going to be doing some of that type of stuff in the summertime. Also, some Hall of Fame related stuff, as our class of 2019 for the National Wrestling Hall of Fame class set for Honors Weekend, first weekend of June. I will be making the trip back down to Stillwater again to talk to every inductee and get them on the Legend Show. Also, we'll be doing two shows, hopefully this week, before I leave for China. Yes, I'm doing the television with Sean Kenny from ESPN for the Asian Championships, and Xi'an, that's X-I''AN. Pretty sure I'm saying that right. I'm sure I'll find out when I get there on how to say it. I'm having some visa issues right now. The Chinese consulate has been less than fun to work with in trying to procure my documents to go to mainland China. So, Guillotine Show's got some big news coming out of Augsburg University in the coming days, if it hasn't come out already. Also get an interview with the national championship coach, Jim Olsoff, of the wrestling program at Augsburg University. Yes, Augsburg University, no longer Augsburg College. They've got the U behind their name now. That's in Minneapolis. Was out that way earlier today for something unrelated, but that's what we've got programming-wise. Also, going to have a new episode of Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling, where we will do a season review for Hokie Faithful. And those of you interested in Virginia Tech Wrestling, you can email me or send me a DM on Twitter if you've got a question for head coach Tony Roby. Do that before April the 17th. Actually, yeah, Wednesday's the cutoff. So do it before April the 17th to get your question on the show with Coach Roby. Got some things coming down the pipe. Good stuff. But today, talking junior college wrestling with the NJCAA national champions, the Cougars of Clackamas Community College, and head wrestling coach Josh Rhoden. He's got some cool stories to tell, some interesting feedback, and we will get to that right now here on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me, because you've always got time for short time. Another episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Going to return to the great state of Oregon, which is green most of the time, but today we're talking with a guy who likes the color red and gold because they are the Cougars of Clackamas. They are red and gold because they are the national champions of the NJCAA for the third time in school history. Josh Rhoden, welcome back to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast.
JB, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited about it.
last time you were on the show was February of 2017. You had just won the school's, fourth straight national duels title at that point. Episode 312. We're now in the 500. So a lot's happened since then. But first off, you've got the first national title since 2011, third in school history. The first one was back in 1971. Is that a big sigh of relief for you to finally hit another title?
You know, it is. I told somebody, I said, obviously we got that first one in year 5 here, and it was like, okay, yeah, this is going to be something we can do pretty regularly. Well, it's harder to get back to the top of the mountain in some respects, I think. We've been really, really close a lot of times, 3 runners up and a couple of thirds, but feels really good to do it. And in the fashion we did, setting this national scoring record was pretty incredible, man. So it was a lot of fun.
So the saying "second sucks" actually probably resonates with you pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to put it in perspective because my wife helps me do that a lot, like most wives. And it's, our first year here, we were 5th, and that was the first time they'd gotten a trophy in, I don't know, however long, 10 or 15 years. And we were just on top of the moon, it's like, it's great. And then we win a national title, and then everything else is sort of, blah, right? It doesn't taste, food doesn't taste as good, all those things. So it's, yeah, absolutely.
Couple milestones. Again, that was the scoring record. You also had a 48 match dual meet win streak that went through, and that ended in January against Northeastern Oklahoma. Although, to be honest, all likelihood that was going to end this year anyway, because you guys had a duel with Oregon State, and it's not too many junior colleges beat Division I opponents. But let's just talk about what was special about that streak. 48 in a row, no matter what level, is nothing to sneeze at.
No, man, that was pretty cool, and it's awesome because, we sort of didn't know. We were just sort of living out our philosophy and going through each year. We knew, hey, we had a year where we were undefeated, and then, there's another year that we kind of strung together a great year. And then one of the local paper guys like, hey, there's 38 wins in a row here before we sort of knew coming into this year. And it's like, hey, that's pretty cool. And so we started kind of pumping it out there, and we had a close one to start the year with Western Wyoming, a tough team down there in Wyoming. And then kind of going through the year, and we always circle Northeast Oklahoma. We usually see them at national duels, and neither of us we didn't attend that event, this year. And we see them out there in a long day and get beat pretty good by them. And Joe and I have kind of a standing joke where, I've beat him several times for the National Dual Meet Championship, and he wins the team title. And finally, this year they beat us in a duel, and we ironically win the team title. So evidently, whoever wins that duel, the loser is going to do something special at the end of the year. So, yeah, it was pretty awesome, man.
So where do you sit? The big chatter in D1 is all about, the tournament's fine as it is. We don't need a dual champion to determine a national title. Where do you sit? Because you've been on both sides of this now.
Man, honestly, I think there's something to the idea that I put the 10 best guys on the mat. Now, thankfully, there's times where that happens to be, the case no matter what, right? But I love dual meets. It's fun. It's engaging for people who are sort of, your non-traditional wrestling folks. They get it a little bit easier, right? We're keeping score. It's my team versus your team, and people advance in a bracket. So there's something to the idea that let's keep it as easy and simple to understand as possible, because you and I both know we can try as hard as we want to explain tournament scoring to someone, but it is hard to understand if you're just kind of the casual fan, right? And so I think it just makes it a little bit simpler to follow. And I do love that. It's a fun event. Our teams love it. This year we just thought, it has not worked out very well for us. So let's try something different. And that's truly where we went with it. Because maybe the little bit of, we're already the best team because we've beaten the Iowa Centrals and the Northeast Oklahomas in a duel, right? And so they maybe don't train as hard, or you try not to have them think that way, but I don't know. There's just an aspect of it. I'm like, all right, let's not do it. And then in total irony, it works out. So anyways.
Granted, you guys are not that far from an airport, and I'm saying you guys are in generally the Portland metro area. So getting to Louisville wouldn't have been that difficult in terms of travel. But, moving the tournament farther east, how much did that really also impact that decision not to go to national duels this year?
Yeah, the cost for us was the big thing. We would have had to left on the 2nd of January. So the timeline they were working with was just difficult for us. Not a lot of West Coast teams, us, Southern Oregon's out there once in a while. Southwest Oregon was there this year. And I think there's a couple of California schools that attend, but gosh, for us moving it that close to the holiday was hard because it was going to be like $650 a ticket. And we looked at several different airports, not just usually what we do is we'll fly a major hub. Cause like you said, Portland to Chicago or Portland to, a major airport and then drive is what we typically do just cause it's, more cost effective for our tiny program. And so we're ballers on a budget, Jason, and you can appreciate that, I'm sure. And, so we're trying our best to make every resource, every penny count. And so for us, it was like, okay, Northeast Oklahoma's doing something the next weekend. We can fly to Kansas City and drive. And it was $250 a person. So, for us, that was what it was about, was dollars and cents. And so I'd love to see that event, in a time frame that works better for some of us smaller budget teams who are trying to do, big things like that. But they have to work with what they do. I mean, when can I get most volunteers and when can it work for the people who are going to, most of the teams that are going to be able to attend. And so I totally appreciate where they're at too.
Be a heck of a bus ride from Oregon City to Louisville.
Holy smokes. Could you imagine? I think one of the old guys back in the 1971 team, they'd said that in 73, they were there for their third year at Clackamas. And he said they took a bus ride from here to maybe like Bismarck or something where they had nationals. And I'm thinking, I don't know how my kids could miss that much school. They're not no online classes in 1970, whatever it was when they did that. And it's like, holy cow, dude, could you imagine it take 6 days to get out there or something? You got to stop and work out still.
Yeah. In case you're wondering, it's 35 hours if you want to drive.
Straight through, man.
I mean, it's a 6-hour flight if there was such a nonstop. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at either. But one thing you talked about with being ballers on a budget, you guys also have some unique fundraising things. One of them is what? You got like a crab cook-off or something like that? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. We do a crab feed every year in the fall. End of September, we have our fall camp that we do. We start in the beginning of September with our guys. And then the end, we do this huge, crab feed week is what we call it. And this year we're going to have our, I want to say 8th annual crab feed. And we bring in all kinds of alumni, just supporters, wrestling people, even non-wrestling people, parents, different things. We sell tables, individual tickets, and we go out and buy $7,000 worth of seafood, basically, right? So we have like 20 cases of crab, 50 halves in a case of Dungeness crab, which is, pretty common out here. And right here in Clackamas, they have one of their shipping receiving areas, so we can just go right here, 5 minutes away and pick up all of this seafood. And then we have people come in. We do a silent auction. We do a live auction. We do 50-50 raffles. We do all kinds of, fun, sell gear and everything. And people come in, have a blast, man. We have a little cocktail hour and we do beer and wine. And it was something, honestly, just totally grassroots. Started out of our house with it. In one of the bedrooms, my wife and I, before we had our second kid, it was like all this auction item stuff in one of our second bedrooms up here. And, we were at the little museum here in town, and then our college president attended the second one, former college president. And she says, hey, let's try and get this event on campus. And I mean, it exploded from there. It went from, 120 people or whatever it was that first year to 200. We're selling it out. If you're not on top of it right away, because people love it, man. They're excited. And we're seeing friends of ours. They're like, hey, when's the crab feed? Because they know they want to get a table or 2 tables. So it's pretty crazy, man. It's a great time and a great fundraiser for us, truly.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I grew up on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay, so I know all about that type of stuff. Although the crabs are slightly different. We got the Chesapeake Bay blue crab out there. That's kind of our crab of choice.
Yeah, and it's not bad either. Don't get me wrong. That's some sweet stuff out there. We've been out there and had it a couple of times, and it's awesome.
Now, circling back to, again, I want to stick on the budget thing because a lot of people that, let's be honest, don't pay a whole lot of attention to junior college wrestling, whether it be the NJCAA or the California community colleges, which have their fall season in one semester. And from a fundraising budget standpoint, scholarships, how does all that work for, in a nutshell, for those who are unfamiliar?
Yeah. So in our case, the college gives us an operating budget, essentially of $16,500. Right. That's to do everything all in, fundraising, not scholarships, but travel, recruiting, anything that you could imagine inside that operational budget, lodging, meals for the kids, all that stuff. And so, as we both know, that's probably our national duels trip. Depending on where we stay, how far it is, how many nights, we're probably in the $10,000 range anyways with flights and everything. So we have to go out, and typically we do about $50,000 of fundraising in a year. And that's going to help us, supplement some assistant coaching pay. It's going to help us, with some of our scholarship stuff where we meet some needs to kind of get caught up with, the teams that have some that are fully funded on the scholarship side, which we are not. We can do tuition only scholarships for our athletes, and so we have to go out and hustle a little bit, which we've done a nice job of as well. With the help of both my, assistants, Brett and Rich, have done a great job for us here and helped us do that and got them a little bit extra, financial benefit on the side as well. Cause you're kind of making peanuts at this level, as it, pertains to other divisions. And so, not necessarily even a full-time gig, right? Everybody's an assistant coach here is a part-timer, cause their actual day job is doing something else, right? Their hobby and their part-time job are the same thing, is essentially what's happening. And so, there's a lot of fundraising. The Crab Feed's the most unique event we do. We do a couple of tournaments and obviously a camp as well. And just to try and kind of keep things going in the direction that they are and the trajectory that we've been on.
What are the struggles of, wrestling out in the Pacific Northwest? There's a handful of junior colleges out there, and a lot of them are with what's considered the Northwest Athletic Conference, which is kind of its own little entity within the junior college world. First of all, explain how that conference works with general athletics and how you guys as a member of that are allowed to compete with the NJCAA.
Yeah, so everyone, all the other athletic teams at Clackamas are a member of that conference, Northwest Athletic Association of Community Colleges. And so they participate in that conference. They have a conference championship, and that's the end of the season. They aren't in the NJCAA national championships, and as a result, we're kind of unique in that sense, and that's both good and bad. Being a wrestling, and you don't want to be too much, more different or any targets on your back or bullseyes, because you worry about the obvious is, how secure are we in that? And obviously we're secure. I don't say that for any other reason than we're different. So we compete at the national championships. And so, us, Highline, Southwest Oregon, Umpqua, and North Idaho are all in that similar situation where we have wrestling. It's not currently sponsored in the NWAC, and so we participate in the NJCAA, which is great for us out here. But at the same time, like you said, it's unique that you and I are even having this conversation, and we're the national champions, because most of the team champions come from the Midwest. Not very, very few at any division have come from the West, and so to be able to do that out here, I think, is somewhat unique, and it takes quite a bit of work, as we've sort of talked about and you've alluded to. But at the same time, now where do we go find competition? Well, for us, it's a lot of wrestling for-year schools, and thankfully, some of these programs will schedule us and duel us, and we'll do home and homes and a lot of different tournaments and things like that. But at the same point, there's not a lot of junior college duels. We have 4 essentially, with the other 4 teams that are in the conference. And so it is unique, man. It's, there's definitely some struggles to it, but, we've been able to sort of navigate those waters as best we can and come out on top.
So is it a relationship with the NJCAA through the conference level, or is it individually through each school?
Yeah. So each school, can be what do they call it? Not a part-time member, but
dual affiliate or associate.
Yeah, exactly. A dual affiliate. And so they get to say, hey, we're going to have wrestling at the NJCAA level, but the rest of our sports essentially are like what California does with their 2-year schools, is just compete within Oregon and Washington. And that's the conference that we compete in. And that's essentially their end of the year championship, as well as those 2 states with those schools.
So where do you feel the relevance is for 2-year programs, whether they be in California, whether they be in the NJCAA, in the general landscape of collegiate wrestling, now that the APR really has impacted those junior college kids going to Division I, more than we saw in the past? I mean, we're not pulling a guy out of Lassen back in the day like a TJ Williams, for example.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely changed. It's changed a lot of things. It's changed how they recruit our kids. It's changed how we talk to our kids about what's necessary here, especially for us at Clackamas. I mean, we have an awesome graduation and 4-year transfer rate of about 75 to 80% in 2 years. And it's really expedited it for us to say, hey, if we want to do that, and that's something we set out when I first got here, like, how can we be different? We're going to be awesome in wrestling. How can we be different than some of these other schools? The North Idahos or the Iowa Centrals or the Northeast Oklahomas, who we've talked about, are going to be awesome in wrestling. So how can we set ourselves apart? And I'm not saying they're not doing this. I'm just saying, how can we do the best job we can so when we get in front of parents, that we get to have the difference maker. And so, we talk to our guys about this exactly, like, hey, look, you can't go Division I. We got to have a 2.5 or higher. C's don't just get degrees anymore, Jay. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to make sure.
Little close to the vest there, boss. Little close to the vest.
And I'm not hustling you. I'm just saying, that's the motto back in the day. And I can remember because I was one of those guys, man. Like, hey, if I'm getting a C, I'm passing. We're getting our degree. And so, for our kids, it's got to be, if you're serious about Division I, then we got to be serious about the academic side. And, there's so many more kids that we see that are obviously very serious about wrestling and don't like math and science as much. And so, for us, it was like, all right, we got to have some academic coaches, and we have an academic coach who we meet with every week, and we have an academic advisor. And those two things I think are somewhat unique for this small level and the athletes that we're working with who need the resources. Don't typically get the same amount of resources as some of the schools they'd like to be at, right? And so there's some of those things that you have to work with and work through a little bit. And we've tried to meet those challenges because you're right. You're not seeing, TJ Williams and those guys at that level. There are some, but they're fewer and further between.
Oddly enough, Lassen's a California school that actually competed up with the NJCAA for a number of years. So kind of a interesting asterisk on that story. And one thing in talking with Frank Beasley, the head coach at George Mason, talked about his career as a junior college athlete. Yeah. He didn't go because he struggled in school. He actually had really good grades. He went because he needed some time to develop on the wrestling mat and to save some money because, for him, it was, sometimes the tuition is so much cheaper at a local school where, okay, I can go wrestle and, I don't have to pay $300 a credit hour out of state.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing that more now. I think as we get to the place where we're looking at rising education across across all levels in the United States, we're seeing more kids that are very, very good students that maybe you wouldn't have seen before. Maybe even when I was at Clackamas in the late '90s, simply because of exactly that. Like, we cost right under $100 a credit. We can help with that tuition reimbursement if you're a really good wrestler, and so essentially, you get your financial aid money, and that's going to help pay for what you need to pay for on campus. And so, versus taking some percentage of a scholarship that they have to work with at Division I or Division II even, and take out, $15,000 to $20,000 in loans a year. I mean, we're a bargain. And so, and we're wrestling the same schedule as most of these guys in our case. And in a lot of cases, when you see some of the junior colleges at the top and throughout the country, that they're wrestling the same dudes that you're going to wrestle at any of those schools for the most part, right? Save some of the top echelon Division I guys, but we see the same kinds of guys at Reno and at Vegas, where you see North Idaho and Western Wyoming entered in the events, and even at the Midlands, where you've seen some junior colleges and small schools. So it's like, there's opportunities out there other than just going and taking on debt, and then guys like an Eleazar DeLuca for us, or a Robbie Rosalino who end up at Rutgers and NC State respectively, or a Colt Doyle or a Josh Reyes that are down at Oregon State. I mean, they save some years of finances so they can still go chase the same dream that they wanted to, while they develop, like Frank mentioned, or while they, continue to just decide, what do I want to do? And mom and dad aren't going to, sign on to paying for 2 years of, $40,000 worth of loans if I'm not sure what I want to do yet. So that's kind of where we can kind of step in and help some of those kids figure out where they want to go and what they want to do.
With the addition of a lot of programs at the NAIA level, that really seems to be where those coaches are kind of going to the junior colleges and supplementing the lineups. I know that Dave Pacheco at Sacramento City, who's recently retired again, the California system has sent so many kids to Division II in the NAIA. With all these new programs popping up, how has that helped you as a coach be able to deliver more guys to the next level?
Man, it's really cool because you get to see, a lot of kids, one, continue what they love to do, and two, get rewarded for, you and I both know lots and lots of years of mom and dad taking them to tournaments, or, lots of years of just time spent perfecting a craft, and having that come out on the other side with them, being able to be rewarded with that scholarship, with that opportunity to get an education and, better themselves. I mean, it's such a cool thing. And now for us, especially out in the West, where Oregon's added, like 6 programs in the last, handful of years, it's a cool opportunity for these guys to get to stay at home now, because before that, there was we were on the short side of everything, man. It was 3 or 4 schools left, and now we're up to about 8 or 9 schools out here. And so it's just a cool opportunity for these kids, I think. And, there's a lot of kids in our program who maybe they, share mat time and then they lose the wrestle off to go to nationals. And so they're having these opportunities since we're, a solid program, and coaches will look and say, hey, what about this kid? He didn't wrestle in the nationals, but he's an excellent wrestler. We want to give him some money. And we see those guys go to the NAIs and D2s and get on the podium as well. And so it's just a cool opportunity that you get to see more opportunities given in the sport. It's just awesome.
What's also interesting, though, is schools like Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon that will wrestle you, even though, according to the NAI bylaws, those matches don't count for them at all. So sometimes you'll see it listed as exhibition. Sometimes, it's kind of dicey, but those teams and those coaches are still wrestling you.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. And one thing that I definitely would love to say, because, so many wrestling people listen, it's like, how could that not count? The exhibition side of that drives me nuts. You're hurting wrestling, broadly.
It counts for the NCAA, mind you. Those matches. What
I'm saying? Like, what are we doing there?
They don't count for your qualifying, your RPI, but they do. It's a countable match.
Correct. Right. And so, what's ironic to me is a lot of NAIA schools will compete junior college kids next fall on their teams. And yet, if they wrestle them this year, that match is an exhibition. It's like these kids are going to compete for you. You want to, we want to schedule those duels and we want to wrestle those matches, and we want them to count because you want the kids to. It's just an interesting little dynamic that, exists, I think. And it's probably at the administrative level less than the, wrestling coaches level, because all we're out here to do is go wrestle matches. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. We're going to schedule events and compete.
All right, let's talk about scheduled events. Let's talk about competing. NJCAA national champions. We talked about that at the onset of the show. 9 place winners. You had 8 of those in the top 5. And now that is an important distinction, because we talked about the nuance of the NAIA not counting NJCAA. There's a nuance of the NJCAA where officially, if you're top 5, you're an All-American. That 6, 7, 8 technically is not considered an All-American under NJCAA rules. But how do you guys in the NJCAA kind of find your way around that 6, 7, 8 placement for your kids?
Yeah, so the NWCA helps us out. They award a All-American certificate at that level for those kids, because I think there's value to what they're doing. Like, how can we've expanded our tournament. We've added teams to the event and wrestlers. If you look back, even when I started here in 2006-07, those tournament brackets were shy, like 8, 9, 10. There's buys all over the place. Well, we've reconfigured it. We've added teams. And so now we have full brackets.
And you're also seating appropriately to a point.
And now, oh Lord, you don't know how touchy that topic is at the coaches meetings. But yes, we have to be able to seed the tournament so that people who are watching, who we talked about earlier in the conversations that we've had, maybe the casual fan or grandma and grandpa who've only followed Johnny a little bit, are like, hey, look, Johnny's the 4 seed because he's always been in that spot in the bracket, but that's not really true until the last couple of years. So sorry, you sort of sidetracked me there because that is a hot button topic, but we certainly got to do a better job there so that we can promote the NJCAA better. And so, seeding helps us do that. How can we help promote kids? Well, we rank them all year and then we seed them according to how they finished and their record. Well, that would be common sense, Jason, but that doesn't always win. So, yeah. We're
in a sport that, let's be honest, sometimes is devoid of common sense. So, and anybody that's ever been to a seeding meeting knows that that's usually the place where common sense does not exist the most in the sport. Now, as we talk about your team this year, you've got to recycle kids every 2-3 years. So that 48 match win streak, there's a whole bunch of kids that had something to do with that. So, in building a program, I guess you got to build the recognition of where, okay, we're going to come here. We're going to get, a year of eligibility, maybe a red shirt. We get our associates. We move on to a 4-year school. But when you're preparing a team, do you go in each year thinking that you're going to win a national championship, maybe with half the kids you've never seen wrestle at the college level before?
Oh man, that's seriously what we're doing. Like this year we had 10 guys that hadn't wrestled. They didn't wrestle for us last year at the national tournament. The 10 guys that wrestled this year weren't the same 10 guys, not one of them. And so when you say that, it's never truer. And, we have the opportunity to return seven of the guys, I think. We won't end up doing that, even though it'd be wonderful to do that, because a couple of them are going to graduate and they're getting opportunities to move on. And something we've always been really consistent about is, look, our job is to move you on, and then our job is also to go recruit more. And so it's literally, recruiting is a revolving door. It just is. And so, we're never going to hold a kid back and say, oh no, you need to stay here for another year because it benefits us. I mean, we've been, in the fire, and we've been close a couple of times, but it's also, because we let guys go and do what's best for their futures. And so, that's kind of a cool thing I think that we do that's a little bit unique. But also, you're right, man, it's crazy to me that we have the expectation right now, as soon as we get done with the national championships, like, okay, who do we have to replace? Who can we replace them with? And can those guys help us get back to where we want to be? And it's not only us, there's 4 or 5 of us that are out there team wise that are doing the same thing and trying to figure out, who's the right guy. And, it's always beautiful if you can get maybe a transfer, just cause he's got a little more proven, stock than the high school kids. But we certainly go seek out the elite high school kid and also the diamonds in the rough. Who can we polish up and make them good in 9 months? Because it's not, how can I change you, Jason, as a wrestler? It's how can I help what you do well already? And then maybe, tweak a few of the errors and get some mistakes out of the way before we get, our 9 months with you and then move to whatever's next. So it's a wild, wild process, to be honest with you. And as I get a little bit older, it seems crazy to me as I look back and take some time to reflect. It's like, man, it's crazy that we've been able to do it, and how well we've been able to do it out here in little old Oregon City.
What's been your philosophy on the eligibility portion of it? They have 2 years junior college eligibility. I mean, you got 10 guys that were you said weren't in your lineup last year that are on this national championship team. I mean, how many of those were red shirts? How many of those were true freshmen? And how many of those are like you're going to throw back in the lineup next year?
Yeah, let's go through it. So 25 and 33 were true freshmen.
So they've got a red shirt year to burn. They do.
Yes, we could redshirt both of those guys. 41 was in the program last year. 49 was a transfer. 57 freshman. 65 transfer. 74 was in the program last year. Trajan's story is awesome. He's the national champ this year. Wrestles off at 174. Lost to Dylan Rail, who was the national champion for us last year at 174 by 2 points. Goes down a weight to wrestle Dylan Allray, who was a national runner-up the year before for us. Loses to him by a point. Says, can I go up and wrestle 84? He wrestles Nick Maximoff, who ends up being third at the national championships. Loses to Nick by 2. Doesn't get to compete at the national tournament. Comes this year, national champ. So Trajan was in the program last year, but cool story about him, just the perseverance, man. And he's like in the stands at the nationals last year. This is going to be my title next year. And that little time hop with him was special that evening when we got to do that, and that was so cool. 84 was a red shirt last year. 97 freshman, heavyweight freshman.
So in these situations, sometimes the kids will want to wrestle both years. What do you tell the kid? How does that conversation go if somebody says, how do you talk them into using that second year of eligibility, or is that always their call?
We try and make it the call of the kid or the parents at the time we get into our fall camp. We get to see kind of who's in the room. But we do let them know, like, hey, we want everybody ready, because if the opportunity presents itself and you're ready, then we want to get you in there and compete you. Because the goal for us as a team is to try and say, hey, we want to put the best team on the mat we possibly can. And that's the job that I've been employed to do at Clackamas. Now, we also will look at the situation. Hey, Johnny was a national runner-up last year. He needs to get his degree. Tyrell Fortune, let's go him actually. Tyrell Fortune, national champ. We redshirted him because we're trying to get that degree done. We were close. And then he's like, hey, I'm going to come back just because I need to be focused on something and try and get that degree finished. And he did it in the 2 terms that next year and then ends up transferring after that. So, he's a good example of trying to do, hey, you're already a really, really big time stud. Everybody knows it. We don't need to, do our job, which is to give you more exposure. He was already, a common name in most households that know wrestling really well. And so, we give him that redshirt year and try and give him the opportunity to get things done so he can get moved on to wherever he wants to be. And so that's typically what we try and do, unless they're like, hey, I'm wrestling for 2 years and then I'm moving on. Then, great, let's do that and make it happen for him. So
When you have guys like Dylan Reel, who you just mentioned, who had a pretty good resume coming out of high school, spent some time in a Division I room, and then a guy like Tyrell Fortune, who was just freaking phenomenal coming out of high school. When you get guys like that come into your room, what is your job as a coach? How do you teach these guys who come in with such an accelerated knowledge of the sport?
Honestly, I think back to both of those guys specifically. It's how can we get them into positions where they're still learning, right? Like, because we both know that most of the kids that in our room are going to maybe not give them as much of a hard time as some of the guys from Minnesota or when Tyrell's on world teams. So it's like, okay, how can we gain more knowledge with them? And so it's more honestly about, trying to make them more cerebral, like the Tom Brady of wrestling, right? Like, how can you learn from what we're doing right now more so than through repetitions, because they've obviously put in lots of repetitions and their bodies are, physically they're very gifted. And so now how can we help them just kind of gain that more knowledge? And so when Tyrell was on his junior world team while he was here, he comes back and he's like, Coach, I got to hand fight better. Like that was something that he came away with because we got the opportunity to go to FILAs and winning FILAs got us the opportunity on the world team. And so, that next redshirt year was spent on hand fighting and trying to get big guys in there to work with him and push on him and allow him to use his hands better so that he can have an opportunity, not so much necessarily at the junior college nationals, right? But beyond there at the NCAA level or at the world level. And so, just those kinds of things I think are things that we focused on. They're ready for what we're doing, in terms of if we just sat back and did nothing, they would have probably been fine no matter what, right? But just how can we help them benefit from their time with us, I think is more what we're looking at.
Yeah, and to bring up Fortune again, the only junior college nationals I've been to was in Rochester, Minnesota, back 2009. He pins a guy named Brandon Williamson, I believe it was in the finals, and that guy ended up wrestling Division I at West Virginia. So it's not like he didn't have any competition at this level, but there's some pretty decent heavyweights that have come through JUCO in the last. Excuse me, you can't say JUCO anymore, right? The couple good heavyweights that have come through.
And that year I think you had the coolest shirt, which it was just JUCO, and I had that shirt. I rocked that shirt for a long time because I love it, and that's something that we kind of clung on to that, and we always say that we're just some JUCO kids out here, trying to do our thing. So it's a nice little way to pound our chest a little bit.
That was the Wrestling 411. I love JUCO wrestling, and of course now the thing is you could actually say JUCO if you're talking about the all-encompassing NJCAA California, Northwest Athletic Conference. But when you're referring to the NJCAA specifically, don't say JUCO. That's one thing. That's one thing I've learned. Now, let's talk about the team a little bit. I mean, going through the weight classes. I mean, what was the prospectus coming in on start right at 125. Zeth Brower, he finished third. Jason Shaner finishes fifth, and then Elijah Ozuna finishes with the championship at 141. Talk about the lightest three weights and how they battle with each other in the room and what you were expecting from them coming into this season and then coming into the tournament.
The crazy thing is we knew kind of Elijah's value. He was with us last year. We knew he had excellent potential. Both Zeth and Jason were brand new to us. And, if I'm being honest, we had a 133-pounder who was an All-American in 2017 on the team that was a national runner-up, who we kind of thought was the guy there. And at the outset of the season, Jason came in, won the wrestle-off, and then really never looked back, man. I mean, he really got so much better in the room, and it became obvious, like, that's the guy we need to wrestle. And part of that, I think, was the competition between him and Zeth. They're both Oregon kids. They've known each other, different parts of the state, but they've been on some of the same national teams and things like that. And both just fed off of, the environment, the hard work, the attitude, the mindset that we try to instill. And combine that with Elijah, a California kid who's got a pretty unique style in terms of how he scores and where he wrestles in toughest positions on top, and just his ability to get out of crazy situations. It allowed those guys, all three, I think, to have some awesome goes in the room. It was fun to watch, and then also just to benefit from each other, because they were all so very, very talented.
You didn't qualify anybody at 104, or didn't place anybody at 149 pounds, rather. Then 150.
No, but he's probably one of the best guys on the team. Marty Margolis, three-timer out of Maryland, separates his shoulder in the quarters. And I'll make it quick. We wrap the shoulder because he ends up tearing, has three different tears, just had the surgery a week ago. but he's like in pain, tears. Our trainer's rapping. He's like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "We can't get 10 All-Americans if I don't try." And so he goes out there with one arm in the blood rounds to try and medal, and takes the guy down with one arm, pretty slick, but then had nothing, from top and bottom. We get, they run that, they wisely put a bar in on that side that's bandaged and run that thing into the ear. No problem with that. He just couldn't fight it off at all. And so Marty's a tough dude. He's actually going to be back for us, and we're excited about him.
So as we move into, that's interesting. Wow, just like that's like just gritty stuff. We get to 157.
It was awesome because it was close at the time, JB, and with us in NEO, and our guys are there and like around Marty because they saw it happen too, and they're down on the floor in one of the tunnel areas, and he's like, "I gotta try because we can't get 10 without it." And so it's sort of galvanizing a little bit for our team to be like, "Whoa, dude, he's doing this for us. It's not even about him anymore." And so that sort of took a kind of a cool dynamic amongst the team. So
you get a runner-up, Joel Romero, at 157 pounds. Another one of these California. You got 3 guys from California, 3 from Oregon, 2 from Washington, 1 from Arizona, and as you said, Margolis, the one Maryland wrestler. So 9 of the 10 from the Pacific Coast, so to speak. And then Mason McDaniel finishing 3rd at 165. Then Trajan Hurd, as you just talked about, at 174. That triumvirate, that trio right there. Explain their work ethic in the room and how they all played off one another.
It's a good group, similar to the one down below. Joel's really, really good on top. And so it gives, those guys an opportunity to kind of get better in the room underneath. Joel being a freshman, the other 2 being, guys who have been in college programs, learning the hand fight, learning the pace and what it takes to kind of grind things out. He gets an injury earlier in the year. We have a knee surgery. Not sure about his status, and he actually first tournament ever as a college freshman is the Reno Tournament of Champions, and he ends up in the round of 8. They place the top 6 there, and so he has a great event, and it's like, okay, well, this definitely looks like the route to go at this weight class because he's just he's a winner, similar to Mason. Mason's one of those guys just doesn't care, man. He's going to go out there and scrap. If it has to be a match where he's going to go out and score 19 points and see if you can score 20, and he just wrestles that hard. And Trajan's probably one of the harder workers in our room in terms of, just coming in every day, no matter how he feels, taped up, bandaged, heat, ice, whatever, and just go as hard as he physically can every day. He's just a lunch pail guy. I mean, he's the exact definition of a blue collar wrestler. Not going to be as flashy as a Joel or a Mason, but certainly has the, you don't have to look far for him on the mat when you're wrestling him is kind of his mentality. And so, all 3 of those guys just brought super special abilities to the lineup in each of their cases.
Top 3 weights, 184 pounds. Trevor Sen finishes 5th. You got a runner-up with Joey Daniel at 197. And then Tommy Mommer finishes 7th at 285 pounds. It's balance. I mean, you don't look at your lowest placer was 7th. Everybody in the top 5 save the injury in the heavyweight. I mean, that's no matter what year you're having, that's a great year on paper, no matter what.
Yeah, man. When you look at it, we were like, I don't know that you could have planned it out much better. Outside of, I think Tommy was probably disappointed with the 7th. He'd competed with some of the top heavyweights, and beat some of them. So I think he was a little bit bummed about his finish. But really, I mean, we had a chance everywhere. At 84, we're in the semis. Got into a funky position to get to our back. We're actually winning and had a chance to get another guy in the finals there and end up getting stuck literally as the round expires. So it was pretty close. And 97, Joey Daniels, probably an 84 pounder who makes it in the finals at 97, just has the attitude of, I'm a winner. And that's really it. Like he just wills his way to wins. And then, like I said, Tommy, great heavyweight, set the school record for pins this year. I believe he ended up with 25 or 26 falls on the year, but just didn't finish the way he would have wanted to, I think, and that sort of frustrated him some. But yeah, man, I mean, shoot, I think run that back and we'll take it. You know what I mean?
And with the team race, what was it, 2 years? I can't remember what year it was. I remember going in, I was at the Pac-12 tournament, and I was looking at the team score, and we're all, I'm having dinner with the referees, and we're all looking at our phone, watching is like trying to do the math, be like, 3 teams had a chance to win the tournament going into the finals. It was, I had never seen anything like that. So one, let's go back to that year and how nerve wracking that type of situation is as a coach.
Man, 2017 was the year. I'll never forget it. Clackamas is in the lead before the finals are set, right at the start of the finals, by 3 points. I think it's within 3 points of the lead was Clackamas, Iowa Central, Northeast Oklahoma. And we had us in the final. We actually had 5 in the finals that year, man, and we ended up second. So, Iowa Central beats us at 125 with a tough kid, Todd Small. 33 NEO wins that weight class and jumps both of us. 41, neither of our teams were represented. 49, Josh Reyes wins it for us. We jump back in the lead. 57, Dayton Racer wins it for Iowa Central. They jump ahead of us. 65, NEO beats our guy in the final. They jump ahead of all of us again. 74, Doyle for us wins. We jump ahead, and the only person left in the finals is Iowa Central's heavyweight, who ends up pinning the guy to beat us by 2.5 points or something like that. So it was, it was painstaking, man. I can tell you, I actually walked behind the curtain. I was just waiting to hear the crowd because Iowa Central's pretty well represented out there at that event. So is NEO. And, 84, we ended up getting beat as well. So gosh, we had some chances, man. We let a couple get away there.
When we look at the dynamic of the relationships, you talk about, the banter between you and Joe Renfro at NEO. There's other great coaching personalities that really don't get a whole lot of coverage or much play whatsoever. I know, like Jim Ziegler at Northwest College, that guy's a riot. Pat Whitcomb before his termination at North Idaho, he had some interesting stories along the way. But what's it like coaching against these guys? Or who are some of the personalities that you feel are kind of underrepresented in the lore of wrestling?
Yeah, man, there's just so much. I mean, you think about Paul Schmidt at Nassau, who's got so much just knowledge and just history. I enjoy sitting down and visiting with Coach Schmidt. You said Jimmy Ziegler, like he's awesome. I love that guy. Art Castillo at Western Wyoming is one of my favorites. Guy's super intense, super excited, doing a great job at Western Wyoming. We went down there and they packed this place out, man. We're talking about Rock Springs, Wyoming, but it's not like we're going to, State College or something. But they got some dudes in a 3,500. I don't know how many people are in the town of Rock Springs. It didn't look very big. I'm from Prineville, Oregon, and so I'm not judging. Don't get me wrong. But 4,000 people in the town, and they must all been there for that duel. So that was kind of a cool one too. And of course, Joe Renfro, Joe's a great guy. And there's so many more that I'm just, that aren't, coming in my head right now. Luke Moffett. Luke's a great dude. Does a good job out there at Iowa Central as well. And so there's just, there's some fun guys to kind of be around and visit with and, talk shop with as you're, during the year. Maybe not as much at the national tournament, as during the regular season when you're in the heat of it, but, certainly, have a healthy respect for those guys.
You got the Iowa schools battling with one another, Iowa Central, Iowa Lakes, Iowa Western, Nyack, Ellsworth, etc. You don't have that necessarily with the junior colleges up in Minnesota where I'm at. But then you look at in the Northwest, you guys are up there. And I'm just curious on when the addition of Northeastern Oklahoma A&M to the landscape, it seemed to change everything at the junior college.
Mm-hmm.
Joe had done a great job at Labette, has got a national title there, or maybe a couple off the top of my head. But, how much did NEO coming into the fray really just disrupt and change everything?
I think he did do a great job at Labette. He was sort of the model I looked at in terms of ballers on a budget was, him at Labette, dude. He had 3 or 4 team titles, maybe 3, I can't remember exactly, and then instantly, those kids move over to NEO with him, and he starts getting Oklahoma kids that maybe would have looked other places, and now a lot of those Midwest kids, even Texas now with the Andrews brothers, one of them was at Wyoming this year, and those kids aren't looking anywhere else. And so it does change because, they have some state schools there that would love to keep some kids in state, i.e. Jacoby Smith, who maybe would have looked someplace else, other than right there at home. But now they got a place they can go right there in their home state. Or near their home state, because he gets a lot of Kansas boys and guys from the Midwest there that maybe would have went someplace else. So they don't. It doesn't get spread out as much. It doesn't feel like anymore in terms of where kids are going, and he gets a good number of kids there, and for good reason. He's a good dude and runs an awesome program. So certainly swallows up a number of kids I think that could have at least maybe convinced them to come out west. We can't get them on a plane now because Miami's not that far from where they live.
Yeah, and just
excuse me, Miami.
Yeah.
I was told it's Miami.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Miami. And just so I can correct myself, because I always hate being wrong. I don't mind being corrected. Joe had 3 titles at Labette. He's got 3 at NEO, so he's got 6. 1, 2, 3,
he's
4,
got
5.
6.
Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, looks like he's got 6. Just making sure. So, Joe, if you're listening, I don't want to botch your stuff because.
Yeah. He probably will be, and you'll get a text anyway.
I will say this: he has been the best junior college at throwing gear my way. I can tell you that. During Wrestling Shirt a Day, Wrestling Shirt a Day, I was decked. I probably had 6 or 7 NEO shirts out of that 366. I did have a Clackamas shirt in there though. So
yes, you did. I saw that. I actually got. I owe you some gear. I've got some nice stuff. I'll send your way.
Like I said, I work for gear can actually pay the rent. Believe it or not. Now, as we move forward, I mentioned this briefly in terms of the landscape of junior college wrestling. There was we had mentioned Pat Wickham, who has got a national championship with North Idaho back in 2013, most recently, and he was terminated at North Idaho College, which is up in Coeur d'Alene, which I understand is like a beautiful, beautiful campus. But what's your take on that? I mean, what do you know about the situation? And this doesn't seem like it's a good thing for wrestling in the Northwest.
Yeah, honestly, it's a scary thing for a lot of folks, and I think I probably talked to more North Idaho alumni in the last 4 or 5 months than I have ever, because part of what I'm saying to them is, hey man, I'm on your team because them being good and us being in the same conference and having someone that we can compete against real hard and, stay relevant is good for us. So we don't want to lose them. And you and I both know I don't say that casually because it's happened in wrestling. So, wrestling's got a little PTSD when stuff like this happens. And, you look at it and think, are they going to stick around? And I've heard that they're going to. We've talked to John Owen, the former coach there, quite a few times. And Coach O has said that, he's talked to some people higher up there that they're going to keep the program. They've obviously got a national search going for a new coach, but it was a surprise to us that Pat was being let go. And under this circumstance, I don't want to be super evasive, but there was just some sort of, you don't really know what to believe or who to believe it from because it was such a shady way of it going down. And so, you hear some things from folks and you talk to people and it just doesn't seem like it doesn't feel very good when you think about how it went down for him. He and I had talked actually at the conference championship, which they hosted up there. And he says, my time would probably pass. And he's, real, dignified about it, more so than I probably could have been, I think, under the circumstance. But maybe he knows more than he probably knows more about it than I do, and so he's got the taking the right path on how to go about it. I certainly hope that North Idaho keeps their program. They've got the most history of any of us probably in terms of number of national championships and national champions and those types of things. And so, in our case, it was awesome to have them and have Pat, because Pat was super competitive, as was I. I mean, I can remember our wives having a conversation in their gym and his wife saying, gosh, Pat's the hardest to deal with this week because Clackamas is coming. It was the biggest compliment in the world to me because I'm thinking, oh man, I'm sort of getting relevant because I was a nothing and a nobody at the time, and so, in terms of, how that all went down. And he was always super helpful to me as a young coach as well. So, I feel bad for how that went down for them and I certainly hope for their program that it doesn't end worse, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I also, again, got to correct my stats again. I've got Pat with at least 4. Now, my records are kind of dicey since I'm still basically repairing the junior college records that I have, but I know he's got at least 4. Not sure if he was still, trying to think of the last one. First one was in 98, although I've got a missing 93 I don't have a coach for. So if you North Idaho folks or you Northwest wrestling aficionados know the answer to that, be sure to shoot me a note. But Josh, in the time we got left, anything else you want to throw in there? We've talked a lot. We talked about crabs. We've talked about busing to Louisville, which didn't happen, thankfully, for you guys. We've talked about your win streak. No. And one thing I also want to throw about that win streak, it was also pretty cool, is there were some active win streaks going on. Penn State's got a pretty good win streak going on right now. St. Cloud in Division II has a monster win streak going on. Wartburg and Augsburg have beaten each other quite a bit in Division III, so there's no super win streak going on in 3. But in the NAIA, Grandview is approaching 80. So, I mean, you guys got mentioned and within all of those national championship programs throughout the course of the, when you're in the 30s and 40s. So I guess I got to say that's pretty good plug for the program.
Yeah, man, that's pretty cool, and I certainly appreciate the knowledge, dude. I love you're like my encyclopedia for wrestling. So when that was put out there, I was like, holy smokes, dude, this is pretty nice to be in that kind of company. And so certainly, those guys are all doing an amazing job, and we hope to continue to do awesome things here. We got some work to do to get back up into the 40s, 50s, or even to the 80s where Nick's at Grandview, but. No, man, I appreciate all you do, and I'm glad we got to talk about crab. We need to try and get you at the JC Nationals again. I know I'd kind of sidebarred you, direct message you there a couple times about that. We need to get the voice of wrestling out at the Junior College Nationals sometime. I know it's a busy month for you though.
Just got to figure out which event. Got to stack the events so they're not on top of each other. I'd love to have. Gosh,
I know. Yeah, that's NAI the same weekend.
Yeah, well, I'd love 2 and 3 to be on different weekends. One year I went we went junior college 3-2-1 with Kyle and I, and then one year I had a weekend. I couldn't get a hold of anybody from junior college, so I went to the Pac-12s and did that for one day at Stanford. Now Stanford's moved within that. It's like. It was just weird. Like the one year I think I could have done it, I didn't get any response. So, and again, I realize that junior college funding is a little differently. And, it's not the NCAA when it comes to, organizational budgets and such. But yeah, I'd love to come back one of these days. It's just, if we can get some powerhouse programs up here in the land of 10,000 lakes to kick it up. I know Rochester's doing a pretty good job in the non-scholarship division, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Back to Rochester, maybe it might happen.
Yeah, no, that would be very cool, man. We would certainly love to see you out there.
Yeah, let's just move the schedule so you get the refs and the announcers. That's the push.
That would be nice, man. That's exactly what we're talking about right there. Simple. We could probably figure that out, right? Common sense. We talked about this.
And we also talked about what doesn't happen. Anyway, I think we can talk about that for another hour. Josh Rhoden, thanks for the time, man. It was very educational as always.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MatTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to this show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed and you already listened and you love the show and you want to support this show and this network, MatTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.